Hi, welcome to Milligan's Island, where we answer your questions with the best experts that we know and can find. Today we are brought to you by Digital On-Ramp WSI, your full-service digital marketing company, where we turn searchers into visitors, visitors into buyers, and buyers into lifelong clients. We're also brought to you by Fun Gifts for Everyone, which is great novelty gifts. We've got Valentine's Day coming up here shortly. It's going to be some great stuff over there. There's also some new joke stuff going up on the site, so it's going to be no supply line shortages over there. Everything's made in the U.S. Also, we are brought to you by Pellosonic. Pellosonic is a great little device to listen to audio content in a room without bothering everybody else in the room. You can pick up one of those, put it under your pillow, listen to podcasts, listen to music. If you're like me, you got tinnitus, it kind of helps you fall asleep. There's a link down in the description. You can pick up a Pellosonic. Makes a great gift for all occasions. And lastly, we've got a couple books that are going to be on there that are going to kind of fit along with this. Some getting things done. So if you want to click on our Amazon link there and pick up something to read, go ahead and do that. And today we are joined by Vicki Fields. She is a consultant and all around knowledgeable person as far as how to improve your business and especially well, the bane of most companies. It's oh man, I'm sorry, we're getting an error while I'm trying to read this.
Oh
So I think
no.
so. I am going to address that while you go ahead and introduce yourself for us.
Sounds good. My name is Vicki Fields. I am a consultant. My company's name is Elevate Your Team. I have 10 years in human resources, another 10 years in restaurants. Customer service has always been a huge focus for me, but I think the biggest thing that just truly makes me happy is helping other people grow and learn and be better at whatever it is they're trying to do. And a couple years ago, that opportunity came that I could just take a step back from my regular life and do something new and interesting and a little bit for me and a little bit for others. And that's where Elevate Your Team came from. I'm really thrilled to be here today. We're going to be talking about goal setting and the impact that can have on your life. And I am super pumped about that whole concept because it's more than just I want to do this and I want to do that, and I think it's life changing. Honestly, as dramatic and over the top as that sounds, I truly believe that if you spend a little time on yourself, it can have a huge impact on not just you but others around you.
Great. Yeah, before we get started, I did want to say, HR is one of those things that when people are starting out their companies and they're moving on and they're going to start to grow, it is one of the most painful aspects of forming a business. And I wanted to point out that a lot of folks get their business going and they start hiring before they talk to somebody like you to try to put a plan together. And I would want, could you just give like 5 minutes of some of the advantages of, because, having been in business for over 30 years and have had to do the hiring and the firing and dealing with employee problems and growth and planning on new projects and having, getting called into to somebody when they're planning on doing this big upgrade and they hadn't thought about the personnel issues involved in it. It's always such a big. So I wanted to give you a couple minutes just to kind of run down some of the things you can bring to the table that small business owners don't think about when they're about to grow.
What a great summation that you kind of said, having the people aspect of your business be part of the conversation from the beginning. In human resources, we call it being at the table. There should be an HR person at the place that's making decisions because they're the ones that are going to bring up, well, if this is your new business strategy, how many people are you going to need to support that? What kind of skill set do those people need? Do we need to hire that skill set? Can we train that skill set? There's so many people aspects that small business owners might not be focused on because their focus is their business and this wonderful thing that they're growing, and that's their knowledge set, not always the people that create that and can help them get to that goal. And that's why it's super beneficial to talk to someone like myself to discuss what your long term goals are and how people can help you make that successful, and how we can find those people, what we can do to develop those people, and really, most importantly, right now, how we can keep those people, because that's a huge thing at the moment as well.
Yeah, and it's a problem that's not just small companies. Even some large companies get into it. I remember one time I was working with a company that they were changing their philosophy and their
Mm.
strategy to move things to be more voice response oriented. And unfortunately, they didn't have anybody on staff that really understood their voice response system. And when I sat down with the engineering manager and I kind of like, hey, look, I think this is a really great strategy. I think you've identified some of the problems and why people don't like to call in, but you do realize that you don't have anybody with the skills to do this. And
Yeah.
as much as I like the people you have working for you, they they aren't going to be able to step there. They need somebody to come in and step in, and they hadn't even thought about that aspect of the project. So again, I think it's the a lot of what I do is project definition, and it's part of picking a solution and understanding your constraints is the human aspects of it, and that's where I think it's always better to take bring in the consultants early on, make sure your plan's really good, and understand as you make decisions what the consequences are. So that's a little bit of a diversion from what we wanted to talk about, but
It's a good topic. And I would even say, once you think you're stable and in a good place, it's still a good time to touch base with somebody, because the other thing that especially smaller companies don't think about is, if we lose Joe tomorrow, who replaces Joe? If Sally all of a sudden decides to move 100,000 miles away, can she still do the job, or do we need to replace Sally? So even when we're in a comfortable place, it's good to take some time to then plan ahead, which goal setting can do a lot for. Look, I mean, a segue. I didn't even mean to.
well, I was going to give a little bit of a commercial for WSI, in that a lot
Great.
of times you don't have to do everything in house, and outsourcing some of your functions and some of your team augmentation, and especially some of those backup roles, is something that really helps a small business be. If you move from being a one man shop or a small shop that's a job to a real business, when you can have backups for all your roles, and you can grow your team as you grow without having to actually do a lot of hiring in house. So outsourcing is a great way to fill in those open spots and bring in some expertise from outside that will allow you to do things that you can't necessarily do in house.
That expertise that from outside is such a great point. I study HR. I focus on HR. I have the resources from national organizations. Someone who's running a bread shop does not have those things. And wouldn't it be better for them to grow if they had access to things like that?
Cool. Well, let's. We don't have a really good. You did a much better switch between topics last time. So we're just gonna jump into the question. I have really no good way of switching to that. So you are much better at it than I am. So the first question is: should I measure activity or results?
That's such an interesting question, because my gut says both. I think it really depends on the goal. I think that the activity is what I would say first, but how specific is your goal to be able to do that? And just because you're measuring your activity doesn't mean you can't keep your eye on the goal, on the result. So here's a specific example for that. The favorite New Year's resolution: losing weight. So I say I want to lose weight this year. First, I need to do some research on what a healthy amount of weight for my body size and type and demographic is to lose in what time frame. That way I'm not just making numbers up. I have some sort of understanding of what's realistic, what can I truly do. And that doesn't take long. Quick Google search, couple minutes, find the information immediately. I then make a goal that I want to lose 10 pounds in 3 months, we'll say. I then set an activity that's going to help me to get to that goal. I'm going to say steps because my Fitbit's right here and it's an easy thing for me to measure. So I start with a baseline of measuring how many steps I take on average. Let's say right now I take 8,000 steps a day. A really healthy goal is 10,000 steps. So I can decide how good did that 8,000 feel? Can I go ahead and try and push myself to that 10,000? Or do I need to push myself to that 9,000, see how it is, and adjust? So now I'm measuring the activity, I'm measuring the steps. But after 3 months, and I don't even know if I'd wait that long, after a month, do some check ins. Are my activities that I'm hitting actually making an impact on my goal and the results, which is the pounds that I want to lose? So, yes to activities, but also yes to your results. I think they line up together.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point about it's really hard to, a lot of times, to measure our results because we have very little control over them. There's usually some process between our activities and our results. And so if we just measure our results, we don't, everything's out of our hand. But
You're
if
missing some steps, right?
well, but if we measure our activities, those are things we can actually do and take responsibility for. And the missing piece between them is we want to make sure that those activities are productive and that we actually see the results from the activities. And if we don't, we need to figure out why. Are we doing the wrong activities? Are we not doing the right activities enough? Do we need to be doing them in a different way? Are we applying them to the wrong space? So
Is there
measuring
another
both.
underlying issue? I mean, there's a lot of questions there.
And if we measure both and do a comparison, it really gives us the ability that now we can debug our process as opposed to being completely a passenger on through the year. Um,
It's a great point.
yeah, can you kind of started off on the SMART goal kind of framework? You want to for folks who are just tuning in aren't used to that kind of way of explaining things. Can you walk us through that real quick?
Sure, sure. SMART goal is a wonderful acronym to remember all of the pieces that really need to be put into a goal to be successful. New Year's resolutions have something miserable like an 8% success rate. And the biggest reason for that is we don't put any time into creating a goal that you can actually work on. We just say, I want to lose weight, or I want to quit smoking, or I want to read a book, or I want to start reading, things like that. And it's just very vague. So the SMART goal helps us break it down into not only understanding what that goal is, but how we're going to do it. So SMART stands for specific. So it can't just be, I want to lose weight. It's going to be, how much weight are you going to lose? And more importantly, how are you going to do it? In my example earlier, I said I did some research. I decided it was going to be 10 pounds. And I decided that I was going to do it through upping my steps, whether that's hiking, running, whatever activity that is. It's the steps that I'm focusing on. The next piece is measurable. I can't just say, I'm going to lose weight and hope it happens. I have to be comparing my data from now until then. And I've already given 2 data sets. That's the weight I want to lose and the steps. So those are the things I'm measuring. But there's a third piece to that we'll get to at the end of our little SMART acronym. The next piece is achievable, A, which is a really good question. Can I lose 10 pounds in 3 months? I don't know. That's why Google is important, or Yelp, whoever you use, doing some research or finding somebody who is an expert in this. Back on our health thing, I know several people who are involved in social fitness clubs. So I could go to one of them and say, hey, I'm really interested in getting serious about my weight loss, but it's a slow journey. Do you have any resources or people that maybe I should talk to? So getting your baseline together and understanding what achievable means for you is a great place to start. I really like another A that I heard a long time ago, and I've only ever heard it once, but I keep sharing it because I think it's really important. The other term for A that I heard was agreed upon. And what that means is when you make a goal, it almost always is never by yourself. It is typically going to impact somebody else or you'll need support from somebody else. And so it's important to look around and go, okay, who needs to be on board with my goal? Who are the stakeholders, if you will? For losing weight, I'm going to be taking time away possibly from my family or from other activities. So I need to make sure that for me, it happens to be my partner or my daughter are on board with supporting this. Maybe they want to come do it with me and the whole family could get involved. And that creates a support structure for my goal, which is super important. So that's SMA. Next is R. Is it realistic? Again, that goes back to the research piece. I know I keep hammering that, but you don't know what you don't know until you get a little bit of data or information underneath you. And sometimes it's as simple as just trial and error. I set a goal once to, in 2 months, scan all of my old photos, because I am of the age where in my 20s we actually took physical photos and I had to take them to the store and get them developed and brought them back. And I have a whole little hidey hole of really old pictures that I was like, I'm going to scan them over a 2-month period. Within 2 days, I realized that my time frame was incredibly unrealistic and that I couldn't do it. So I just stopped, reset, reanalyzed, and decided a different way to go about that goal. So don't beat yourself up. Don't get upset if you realize it's not realistic. Just adjust as needed. And then the last one is T. That's time bound. That's that months piece I talked about in the beginning of my goal. I said in 3 months, I'm going to lose my 10 pounds through increasing my steps to 10,000 a day. That's a very specific goal. And then at the end of 3 months, I can look at it and say, okay, did I lose my 10 pounds? Did I hit my 10,000 steps? If I didn't, I need to look at why. What roadblocks did I run into? Can they be removed? Is there something else hidden underneath all of this? Or was I just lazy and didn't do it? And sometimes that happens too. How's your mental health? Where are you in your life? Who else is demanding your time? There's so many things that have to be addressed for a goal to be successful. But I think the biggest thing to take away from SMART goals is that if you want to be serious about achieving whatever it is you said you want to achieve, you have to put a little bit of time into it first to frame what that actually looks like. Get yourself a plan, so that way you can follow the plan.
Yeah.
Smart.
So I always like the thing about measurement is knowing a little bit about math always helps. I worked with a lady who, when our goal was to reduce the time to process something by 100%, and I was trying to explain that that means it would happen instantaneously, and that's not
Right?
realistic. So, making sure that you agree upon the goal and that it's measurable, and having an engineer there to kind of explain math to you can sometimes be helpful for that.
That's your support group, right? I mean, if you have a financial goal and finance isn't your background, you need to find a finance person.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, that's kind of one of the reasons I always bring some experts in here to answer some questions, is because none of us, as well read or knowledgeable as we are, can know anything, especially as complicated as the world has gotten.
You are correct.
So, so the next question was, how can I tell if my goals are achievable if I never tried them before?
The first thought that came to mind when I read this question was, well, does this goal directly speak to you and your values? Because you don't want to spend time on something that isn't going to be achievable. If it doesn't directly speak to you and what you want to do and what you want to accomplish as a person, as a whole, there's absolutely no way you're ever going to achieve any goal, even a simple one. So I would take a step back and ask that question first, and then I would break it down a little bit more systematically. Look at your end goal, check your baseline, and make incremental, achievable steps from there, and check in often. We said, back to our original example, we said in 3 months we want to lose 10 pounds, this many steps. Well, I figured out my baseline was already 8,000. I say, all right, next week I'm going to start with 9,000. 9,000's a breeze. And in a week, I'm like, oh, that was silly. I should have gone right up to 10. and then the week afterwards I start with 10. Maybe I do 8, I step up to 9, and I'm like, this is miserable. I cannot do this. And I just go back to 8 and start from there and make smaller steps. 8, 5, then 9. Maybe it's every week, maybe it's every 2 weeks. You have to play with it every day almost, and not be concerned that you're tweaking it. In fact, you should be tweaking it, because every day is a little bit different for us, and we need to work with our best self. And if your best self is 8,500, then that's your best self right now, and you should be proud of that.
Yeah, I really like the idea of first addressing, is this the right goal for you? I think that idea is something that's so important, because we usually find that we want to do something, but the work necessary to achieve it, is what economists call revealed preferences. You know, it's something that we say we want, but when it comes time to put our actual effort or money or whatever into it, we don't demonstrate that we want it. We want something else. And being very honest with ourselves and figuring that out is really important. And no matter what we do, if we don't go through that step of figuring out if it's the right goal for us, we're never going to be successful. We really need to figure out what should we be working on and committing ourselves, because the second part of what you talked about also feeds into that. Um, my dad always used to tell me that whenever you start something out, when you're doing push-ups or you're going swimming, or he was a mason, so he would always be building things. And he said, that initial effort to do something was where most of the effort was. And once you kind of get into the pattern and the habit of doing it, you're going to find that you can do far more than you ever dreamed you could do. And when we start putting effort into doing things, it's that we need to commit ourselves to doing that initial effort, because it's going to be slower than we thought it possibly could be. But once
No,
we
is
get but once we get started, we're going to find out we can do 10, 100 times more than we thought we could do. And if we pick the right goal and we're readjusting, we are going to be happy that we can do so much more. It's not going to be, well, hey, I can now do 90 steps as opposed to my original 80. Gee, now I got to do an extra 10, extra 100 steps. It's going to be, oh, I can do it. Maybe, and so you start building on that goal as you get excited about it, if it's the right goal. If it's the wrong goal, you're so disappointed. You're going to be very reticent to increase and challenge yourself, because you're not excited about doing it. And getting your head right and understanding it is so important, to make sure that you're always challenging yourself. Sorry, go ahead.
challenge. No, I'm so glad you said the challenge piece, because it does motivate us. Don't. That's why the baseline is really important. My mom recently decided to do a very similar goal where she was going to increase her steps. Now her step level is very low. She's around 3,500 a day. And at first she was like, I need to be at 10,000 a day. And I was like, that should not be your goal right now, Mom. Like, maybe in a year, but that should not be your goal next week. Your goal next week should be 4,000, and see how it goes. You'll hurt yourself trying to extend, and you won't achieve, and then you'll just be upset, and you'll go into a spiral, and it'll be very difficult to mentally climb out of that. So I'm so glad you talked about finding the right challenge that motivates you to continue your goal.
Cool. Let's not waste time and go around to the next one. Um, what do I do if I fail, or if I fall off the wagon, or I miss my goals or start to fail? How do I get myself back to what I should be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I, this is gonna sound crazy. You probably will fall off the wagon at some point, so you need to be okay with that, and you need to be not beating yourself up. My daughter watches this super cute cartoon where one of the toddlers drops and breaks the whole little block building that they are making as a group, and she gets really, really upset about it. And her little friends come up to her and go, "It's okay, try again." And my toddler also gets very frustrated about all the little, very simple things, because she's learning them and she doesn't know how to do them. And so that's sort of our mantra here: it's okay, try again. That's why you have your support system. That's why you have your resources, that's why you spent the time in the beginning to put some effort into it. A great example that for me personally, I'm sure for hundreds and thousands of other people in this world, is quitting smoking. I smoked for 10 years during my 20s. And in my early 30s, I really said to myself, I need to quit. And I tried several times, wasn't able to, and finally kind of got to this point where I realized that for me to quit, I could never, ever, 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 ever have a cigarette again. Which for smokers is weird because we all have lots of friends that can just have a cigarette while having a drink or just have a cigarette at a party. For people who are real smokers, who are addicted to the nicotine, that is just a zero possibility. It's not something that you can do. There's a mental connection, there's a physical connection, and I had to kind of mentally get to that understanding about myself before I could successfully complete that. But I failed that dozens of times. I can't even tell you how many times. But I kept trying because I knew that for my own personal self and my own health and wanting to live a longer life and be a part of my friends and family's life, I had to do that. So there's a couple things that have to align there, but don't beat yourself up. Just keep looking for the opportunity and use your support group to get there.
Yeah, I think I found the thing I find most interesting about this is that a lot of times, our failure is physical, but the actual corrective measure is mental.
Ooh.
In other words, we addiction is probably the most obvious case for this, but a lot of times in business you have the same kind of dynamic playing out, where you have kind of a physical dependency, and in order to address it, you have to have your right mental state, and you can't beat yourself up about what happened in the past. You have to put yourself in a good place and create all the right support groups. And a lot of times in business, we have something very similar happening, um, where we try something new and it doesn't work out, and we immediately fall back to what's comfortable and what works,
Comfort zone.
as opposed to analyzing the failure because the failure is painful. And so
But it's
often,
those roadblocks and understanding those roadblocks is the only way to move forward.
exactly. And I think that when we talk about goal setting, we don't want to talk about failures. You don't want to think about, you know, it's kind of like
We're all
the
going to succeed. It's going to be great.
it's kind of like the prenup of projects, right? Is doing your risk analysis and figuring out all
Yeah.
the places where things can fail. And when you're setting your goals, you really don't want to be doing this because you're bringing up failure early on. But if you have a plan in place to go back and reset and kind of know what you're going to do when you fall off the wagon, or when the lights dim, who are you going to go to for help, what are you going to do when things don't work out. If you think about those things early on in the process, you're going to fall into those, and they're going to propel you to the next step, as opposed to putting you in a really dark place where you don't know how to recover from your failure.
Habits are good and bad, right? Because you can fall into habits that support you and you can fall into habits that don't support you. And the ones that don't support you are often the easier habits to fall into. So you have to, again, line that up with whys. Why am I doing this? Why is this important to me? And then keeping that top of mind. I know when we met, I was discussing how you need to sum up all of your whys into something really short, preferably one word. So if you can line up everything that you believe and think of into one word, and then keep that one word top of mind, or literally posted on a wall in front of you, or put it on the fridge somewhere where you'll see it frequently, it makes other choices to follow goals, to uh, the work that you're going to commit to, the choices you make with your family, all of that lines up much easier because it's there and you know it's going to make an impact.
Cool. Next one is there a way to know if I'm making my goals too easy? This comes into the challenge concept.
Yeah. I say assess as you go. I've mentioned that several times. I know we give a time frame, but you should not wait until the end of your goal to assess if it's working. You got to do check-ins. Am I going in the right direction? Is this what I want to accomplish? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? Things of that nature. Have my Is it still aligned with my goals if something's changed? Uh, and then you tweak from there. Do we need to make the metrics harder? Do we need to make them easier? Is this still the goal I should be focusing on? Maybe 10,000 steps for my weight loss is not the goal I need. Maybe the goal I need is daily yoga or running or mountain climbing. I don't know. I'm making things up, but sometimes you have to reassess if your activity is truly what's going to get you to your goal.
Have you tried any of the like a lot of times we're advised to try to gamify some of
Oh
our
yes,
activities, and I found that sometimes that works really well, but sometimes it takes our eye off of the true end goal. So have you used that in your practice at all, and have you seen some places where it works and some places where you wouldn't advise it?
yeah, I love team building exercises. And so if gamification is wrapped up as team building and done in a way that people are bought in and in an activity that they're interested in doing, I find it to be very successful. I enjoy also learning moments through gamification. So I do a lot of training, especially leadership development training. And there are lots of small games, group games, and activities that you can play within training that directly showcases the point that you're trying to make. So they're small, they don't spend a ton of time on them, but they completely relate. There's obvious connection. Plus you got to have fun and laugh. And Ralph Schmedley, who's the founder of Toastmasters, said we learn in moments of enjoyment, and I couldn't agree more. So yes, there is a place for gamification. Yes, there is also a place where gamification fails because everything's got both. And I've found that especially if it's not set up correctly, which means different things for different groups because it depends on the dynamics of the group, it can fail very easily because you can have people that are like, this is dumb. Why am I doing this? They don't understand the why and they don't understand the what's in it for me.
Yeah, and I think that you brought up something that I think is crucial in my experience, is that a lot of times working through our goals and understanding when we're being challenged and when we're not is much easier in a team environment than in an individual environment. I know, in my past we've tried to bring in new technology into a team, and seeing people who've worked together and have a good rapport learn something new together, it's amazing how fast it goes. But a lot of times you'll take one of those people and move them someplace else where they have to learn on their own, and it's just a grind. And so, the thing that's important to me always when you're dealing with an individual performer and setting goals is having a support system for that person to fall back on, because it's so much harder for them to evaluate themselves and know what's going on, during the course of the set time period where they're trying to achieve that goal.
And you have to understand the person too. An extrovert can work independently, but they're going to need a lot more support and check-ins because they need to talk to somebody. An introvert does not want to talk to you every day. That is not going to help motivate them or move them forward. But they do need support, so you need to understand what that support is for them. And that's just two extreme examples. It can be anywhere in between and all types of other dynamics. But understanding your people is a big support on that as well.
And it's really important to realize that if you have a team, as a lead, you need to be cognizant of that. And also, if you're an individual performer and you're trying to set your own goals, you need to be aware that your likelihood of achieving them is going to be far greater if you can find a support group for yourself. Like you said, Toastmasters, there's a lot of clubs and whatnot. Those kind of things are great to help you get through them.
Absolutely.
And I see we've been joined by a new team member, by the way.
Oh, excellent.
Uh, it's on your side.
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. My dog. He's wonderful. He's a great addition. He's very helpful.
So he's cut off on the live stream, so it looks like you're moving, but we don't know what it is. So I'm just kind of wanted to explain it.
She's up to something.
It was
His
a
pleasure is
furry
working
friend.
from home.
Um, so, are there tricks for holding myself accountable to my goals?
Sure. Um, One, support system. We talked about that previously. We've kind of drug that into the ground. I can't say it enough though, so I'm not going to beat on it, but who is going to help you get there? Um, Even like an accountability buddy is also, if you don't want a full group, even just a buddy that wants to support you through this is a great one. Going back to steps, I have a hiking buddy, and we've planned once a month in 2022 we are going to go hiking, and that holds me accountable because if it was just me planning to go hiking every third Sunday, maybe that Sunday I just don't feel like it, or the weather's just crappy enough that I don't want to go, or oh, I'd rather sit around and hang out with my daughter, which is always great. But how do I achieve my goals of fitness if I don't follow up with the things that I said I was going to do? Now that I've scheduled it with someone else, I feel accountable to that person's goals as well, and I'm much more motivated to accomplish that. So a single accountability buddy is just as supportive as an entire group. Another thing to do, again, we talked about this, is understanding your personal core values, ensuring that they align directly with that. You can also post results as you go, whatever that means. I'm on that fitness group that I talked about earlier, and in there, I post things that I've done. There's somebody who's on a marathon of, they're going to run every day this year. So today was day 5, and they posted already. Day 5, run 5, made it. And everyone's, of course, like, yay, likes and happiness all around. And that's clearly motivating for them. That's not for everybody, but it is for a lot of people. So finding the ways to share your successes and help you through the downfalls are going to be very motivating for you. We talked about the other one as well earlier, is understanding your roadblocks ahead of time. I know that if the weather's really, really cold, I don't like to go outside, and I don't even like to do things inside because I just feel like it's cold in my house, even though it's not. It's all weather perfectly controlled. But mentally, my brain has decided, no, we can't do anything today. It's 20 degrees. So I know that about myself. So when I know it's 20 degrees, I can be like, you can do this. Or my support group knows that, and my accountability can call me and be like, hey, did you do your yoga today? Or whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish. So understanding what your triggers are is really important to motivating yourself to continue. Also understanding why you're doing it and keeping them top of mind. The quitting smoking one, once I finally got to that, this is going to happen point. Understanding that keeping my family top of mind was huge for me because I didn't want to impact them anymore. Secondhand smoke, of course, we know is a huge thing, and I didn't want to be part of that problem anymore. So that helped motivate me. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I feel like I rambled. I rambled a little bit on that one.
well, no, you actually touched on something that I'd like to dig into a little bit more.
Sure.
Is the actually you mentioned changing your schedule and making commitments to doing things on a certain time, and I find that you know a lot of times our improvements are us alone doing something, and we're eventually going to be presenting it to the group or sharing it with the group. But if we actually make changes to our schedule and put those things, the time and the place in our schedule for doing them, and making sure that we do them on time, we do them where we say we're going to do them, and we do what we say we're going to, and make sure that it's on the calendar and we make time for it. Our ability to accomplish the goal goes way up, or our probability of accomplishing our goals goes way up, because we've just it's before we commit to the group, we commit to ourselves, and then we commit to the group, and we commit to ourselves by dedicating some time, and then you know we hold ourselves accountable to actually executing that time because we have a group to be accountable to.
Very well put. Very well put. When I went to get my HR certification, that was a big piece for me, was setting time aside on my calendar to study because I hadn't been in school in 20 years by the time I went to go take this test. which, all those habits are gone after 20 years. So I had to put time aside on my calendar, and I had to research study habits, and I had to then apply those, and I had to get again, my family, my partner agreed upon that I was going to take this time away and I was going to use it to study for this certification because it was needed to support our family. And he agreed. Absolutely. I will support you. I will take care of some of the evening things with our family while you're doing that. But if I hadn't had that time on the schedule, it would be really easy for me to be like, I can do it later. It's fine.
Yeah, and that was actually a really good point you made. Is that when we're younger, like we develop some bad habits in school because we don't have responsibilities,
Ooh,
um,
well,
and so we don't think about when we do things as much, and so we tend to be a lot more ad hoc in our activities. And as we get older and get more responsibilities, we end up finding that those bad habits are really, really tough to break and to correct. And that the younger a person is when they start and adopting these good habits, the better off they are. It's not that you can't learn them as an older person or adopt them. It's just much harder, as time goes by.
you're totally right. I think of the first thing that popped in my head was financials. My mom is an accountant and taught me all kinds of wonderful ways about saving money and doing what you should do. And I did none of it as a teenager or in my early 20s. Absolutely none of it. And then finally, when I kind of was like, I probably should take some of this advice that my mother gave me ages ago, I couldn't get to where I wanted to be. I wanted my 401k to have a certain percentage put into it. I couldn't financially afford that at that point because I had already made commitments for my funds to several other places as responsibilities grew. So I had to set goals to get there, and I started at what I felt was feasible at a lower percentage. And then every year I got a raise, I did the math and bumped up the percentage, what I felt I feasibly could, until I got to my savings goal. And that all came from those small increments and understanding where I wanted to go, and not, you know, or finding the new habits. That's what I was trying to do. Finding the new habits that'll get me to the success I'm looking for.
Cool. The next question was, what if I absolutely hate what I'm doing and want to stop? Do I need to continue anyway?
Ooh, maybe, but maybe, but is my answer. Um, I was in restaurants for 10 years, and I around the recession, I was very fortunate that I was able to keep my job. But the whole industry had changed. Restaurants were very different. The upward mobility, the company itself that I was working for, culturally shifted in a way that just wasn't inspiring to me anymore at that time. But there were also no jobs. It was 2008. Recession was made a problem. So yes, I had to continue working in a job I no longer really enjoyed and no longer lined up with my values. But I continued to focus and looking for new opportunities actively until I found one that was going to fit my needs because I still have responsibilities. I am not in a position in my life that I can just quit a job. I need a job. But I know that I need to be in a job where I am comfortable and excited and aligned with what I want to do with my life. So yes, but maybe but is my answer, if that makes sense.
Well, I think that we talked earlier about the why of goal setting, and that if you establish a goal and you think it matches up to your why, but you're finding yourself miserable, maybe you need to ask yourself why again.
It's
And
really good.
and sometimes it's just a temporary pain you're going to have to go through, and sometimes you pick the wrong goals. And being able to figure that out is really hard. Um,
I think that's why those assessment check-ins are so important. Don't wait until the end of your goal to figure that out, right?
and like for example, I have a friend who this is his hobbies were pretty important, and he got a lot of enjoyment out of them. but I've never seen anybody switch between hobbies so quickly as he does. You know, one year he'll be into trains, the next year he'll be into old cars. Then he'll be into jukeboxes and slot machines and slot cars and models and go back to trains, and he enjoys it all, and he throws himself into it with wild abandon when he does, and then when he decides to change, he usually sells off and picks up new stuff, but he doesn't identify as a guy who is a model railroader or a guy who's into old cars. He identifies himself as a guy who enjoys his hobbies and taking them in at the moment. And I think it's really important not to wed ourselves to an identity. Um, our identity shouldn't involve the things we do as much as us understanding ourselves and being able to realize that, when we set these goals, they're not us. They're
Support you.
things we want to do.
Yeah, they support you. They're not you, but they support what you want to
Right,
be.
and
In theory.
well, but I think a lot of times we kind of lose if we haven't really thought about our identity a lot, we tend to lose ourselves in our goals and make ourselves
We're
miserable.
told to see goals, set goals, and then we're also told by our support groups and social media how we're supposed to look and what jobs we're supposed to be focusing on and how we're supposed to spend our time. Well, really, you need to ask yourself those questions. Not look at everybody else as the example of what you're supposed to do. You can look at everyone else and see what they're doing. Does that interest you? Learn from them, and then take all that information together and figure out what works best for you.
So, one of the times I found this to be of a particular difficulty is when doing annual appraisals. When your employees come in and you have to help them set their goals for the next year. And of course, I can look at what the business is doing and what I need them to do, but that might not be the right thing for them. And so you're always trying to balance the idea of, um, setting goals for your employees that meet your business needs while also meeting their development needs and where they want to go with their career. And sometimes, they're those goals are going to take them away from you, and it's going to hurt. But the right thing to do is to let them go. I mean, so what kind of advice do you have on that?
uh, just be prepared. That's what you're doing. Especially younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, they have zero intention of staying at a company longer than 2 to 5 years. If you get 5 years out of someone younger, you've done really well. So you just have to be accepting of that. But that doesn't mean you don't develop them, because if you don't develop them, they will absolutely leave, and they'll leave quick. We are at a time where employees are calling the shots on what is expected in the workplace, and they expect development, they expect support, they expect it in not only the business through goal setting and leadership and development training or specific job related training. I want a certain certification, or I want a certain line of training that helps me move laterally into this position or up into this position. This is called succession planning in the HR world. And that is something that you as a company need to constantly proactively do and be a part of. Now, 10 years ago, we would have said that's a waste. I'm spending money on somebody who's just going to leave. But it's okay. Another company is spending money on someone who's just going to leave, and they're going to come to your company. But that means that you need to create a culture that is inviting to your current team and the ones that you're trying to pull in. So that's a whole nother piece. But part of that culture is creating a framework of growth and learning and development. Absolutely. Keeping that a priority in your. I love that you talked about aligning those personal goals with your business goals. That's exactly what you should be doing. And typically, I see a lot of businesses that are like, well, these are our goals, so that's what their goals should be. And I'm like, yes, but how are they going to grow while doing that?
Yeah,
Because they can.
well, and as you said, it's really important to realize that when we have employees, we want to maximize their growth, and we may not benefit from it, but the next guy might benefit from it. And but that employee is going to be a lot more loyal to us, or they might bring us an opportunity after they leave, or building that network of successful people is more important than any one little accomplishment. And
Then you
I
have another company advocate.
exactly, I remember hiring developers, and you see a little bit less now, but occasionally you kind of get these folks who they enjoy it, but they really don't. They're really not the deep embedded geek. There's the guy who's the guy or the gal who sees they enjoy software development or they enjoy something technical, but they never it's not their life. They never really threw themselves into it, and they get hired by a company who kind of puts them off in the corner and gives them kind of grunt work to do and never develops their skills. And because they're not deeply ingrained in the culture, they don't have a lot of friends in it, they don't realize how poorly their career is progressing. And in 3 or 5 years, they get tired of their employer, they haven't progressed, they need to go out and find another job. And then they find out that, wow, I've got 5 years of experience, but it's 5 years of the same first day. I've never really progressed past that.
Yeah.
And I've never wanted to be the employer that does that to an employee. And I know and hiring that employee and trying being the guy who has to sit across the desk and tell them, look, you think you've got all this experience and you're a valuable asset, you know and I can see that you have the potential to be, but you just were never developed, so you're going to have to accept a situation that's not where you thought it was going to be.
It's a very
So,
good point. A thing that in HR we call it a stay interview, but even as a leader, you can have touch base meetings where you're talking about exactly those things and where you can go and how you feel about your time in the company and what what does what do you look like in this company in 2 years? What do you think that looks like? And see if that aligns and see what you can do to support that.
yeah, and it's one of the things I found is that employees hate the goal setting aspect of the performance appraisal when it is the most important for their future development and their career and where they're going.
So why do you think they hate it? I've had both experiences, so I'm curious.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a lot of times, people who are employees don't see themselves as being the driver. They want to be, they've kind of accepted a role of being told what to do. They like having a lot of um, control and freedom in executing their job, but they don't necessarily like having those same responsibilities outside of that area. And they get very uncomfortable when they have to start setting goals and things that are outside of their day-to-day control areas. And especially I find the people who are more um, task focused or absolutely focused on like a technical area, that goal setting and thinking about their career is far, far, far outside of their daily duties, and it's more of a discomfort than the fact that they don't enjoy the process.
That's such a good point. I've seen that. I've seen people who are just really thrilled with the work that's doing and they don't want to develop. They just want to keep doing exactly that. And they find the goal setting process difficult because typically the manager is still trying to push them down whatever pipeline that they feel like that is the next step for them. And maybe they're pushing in the wrong way. Maybe, oh gosh, there's a bazillion factors there. But yeah, I think that goes back to understanding your team and trying to support them to their version of success. But that also means understanding what their version of success looks like.
Do you think that's that example is a failure of the management team to have enough imagination to expand the role, as opposed, because like you said, a lot of people don't want to change their role, but you might need them to be a backup, or you might need them to be, take on a little bit more responsibility. And if you make somebody comfortable in their role and appreciate their role and not put pressure on them to advance in their career, but give them the incentives that you need to help fill out your team.
Hmm.
That everybody's going to be a lot happier, and that a lot of times as a manager, you need to be more supportive of that person who doesn't want to move on in their career.
My blanket answer is that it's almost always the management's fault. It almost always is when it comes to people. And it's not always the frontline management's fault. Maybe they've not been given the tools to be successful in managing people as well. Quite often what companies do is they find somebody who's really good at making rivets. They are the best rivet maker in this rivet company, and they go, "You're so awesome that we're going to promote you into a leader because we think you can teach all of these other people to be just as amazing rivet makers as you." But they give them no tools on how to teach other people to be best rivet makers or how to support people through the process of going from rivet maker C to rivet maker A. And they just say, "Do it. Good luck." It's like a little gamble that we make on people in management, and then we don't give them the opportunities to grow there. So while I'm not trying to say that it all falls on the manager, they need support. It kind of all falls on the manager when it comes to people and creating that culture. So if not the manager, leadership in general, the owner. And that goes back to, is your HR creating the culture and supporting the people as needed? Are you giving your HR the support that they need to do that? Do you have an HR? Do you need to outsource that? Uh, there are small companies that have zero HR that do incredible work with their people because that's their passion. So you don't have to outsource. You don't need to hire me, even though I'd love to work with you. but but focusing on your people and being the leader that they need is what's going to underpin all this entire conversation.
Cool. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. That um, just because comparative advantage exists doesn't mean it's universal. That the guy who's the best rivet maker is not always going to be the best guy to manage the rivet maker, and sometimes the guy on the team who's not the best rivet maker might be the best manager, and having his peers, and it's kind of fun because a lot of times the guys doing the work will know the guy who understands the job best, and you know they'll automatically be looking to maybe the guy who's not the best technically will be the guy who they want to they kind of put to a de facto leadership position, and that when you're looking for people to promote, it's really important to see who your employees are kind of flocking to for those kind of positions.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
And I was going to follow up with I had something else I wanted to ask you about on that as far as when uh, we it's amazing how frequently companies limit their resource pool to who's in front of them. So when we do project definition, one of the things we have to identify are our constraints. And it is amazing when you work with small companies how many times the constraints are the people in front of them. And you kind of remind them, look, you have a budget. You could go hire somebody just for this specific task. Whether it's an HR expert or a management expert or some technical task, or like for us it's a lot of times it's bringing in somebody who's familiar with either Martech or something like that to do a job. Um, but it's money is fungible, and you don't necessarily need to spend it on hiring employees that you own and have to be responsible for their care and feeding. Because let's face it, if your business is doing billboards, um, you probably aren't going to have a career growth projection for a web developer. Those, but that doesn't mean you don't need a really great web developer when you need a web developer. And similarly, that so you may not have a company that's large enough to support a full HR department. That doesn't mean that HR task doesn't need to get done. And it's I keep swearing I'm going to write a book called Outsourcing a Love Story.
No,
Uh,
I like it. I like it.
because it's we're in a world where the cost of some of these specialized skills are so are so deflationary, um, that small companies can hire world class help for much cheaper than it is to hire an employee.
And then you can focus on what it really is, what your passion was for that small business in the first place.
And we're kind of getting back to that, to the question in the first place is, if you hate what you're doing and it's not something that's important to your task, stop doing it. Don't make it a goal. Make the goal. Hire somebody to do it.
There you go. There
So we
you go.
pull the transition, pull that transition back from the brink
That was
of
good. That was
annihilation.
good.
Um, all right, and our last question is something I found. I never thought about this, and a friend asked me about it, which is how it ended up as the last question. So, what is a good balance between new goals and my day-to-day work? And he had I can't remember the exact example, but it was, I've got this, this stack of business that has to get done, but I've got these other goals that are, if I don't do them, my business doesn't get to where it needs to be by the end of the year. How do I adjust this balance between day to day and where I need to be?
I would start with being realistic with my time. If I have day to day stuff that takes up 5 hours of my day, and then I look at how much time that leaves, because then you've got your family obligations or outside obligations. So let's just pretend I'm thinking of an 8 hour workday just to make my math easier. But if my day to day is 5 hours and I've got 3 hours left, but I want to set new goals that are going to take 4 hours a day, that's unrealistic. I need to be honest with my time and what I can truly accomplish. Now, back to your point, can I outsource some of this so that it gets done in alignment with my other goals? What am I doing in that 5 hours that is my day to day? Is that all still necessary? Can I remove some of that, stop doing it, streamline some of it, whatever the case might be? You kind of truly have to assess your time, how it's being spent, is it still aligning with your values before you can take on something new, and making sure that that new thing that you're taking on is truly going to push you in the direction that you want it to. Time management is huge. We overwork ourselves, and then our personal lives fall apart, and then our mental health falls apart, and then we're working 12 hours a day and we wonder why. Especially with the move from home, it's so easy for me to just work another hour, because it used to be a commute, so now I can just work. But maybe for my own value alignment, I should go spend that hour reading a book. I should go spend that hour doing the step improvements. I should go spend that hour with my family. You truly have to look at what's going to make the most holistic impact, not just, I have to get all of this done. And again, back to your support system, who is there to do that? Man, you also have to think about like your responsibilities to others. What have you already committed to? Um, and your mental health. And this is not a mental health conversation, but it is the conversation of what's going on. You might be in a great place mentally and can accomplish 10 things in a day, and that's fantastic. Joe is not in the best place mentally and can really only accomplish 5 things, but he's going to spend the rest of that time focusing on how do I get into a better place mentally. So there's a lot of factors, I think, when it comes to that, and it's very personal, but it starts with assessing what you are doing, what you want to do, and what can you realistically do moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that the assessment of what you're currently doing is something that we tend to not do. We tend to have a lot of inertia around that. When I talk to a lot of small businesses, they tend to have a lot of clients that they would not have gone out and searched for on the books, but they're still serving them, and they're taking up an awful lot of their resources pulling themselves in in a direction that they would never want to go, but they're going that direction because they have these old clients, and sometimes, I tell them, look, your opportunity cost, for what you want to do is being burned up with these older clients. And sometimes, you have to make the decision to jettison them, or find another way to satisfy them. And my first answer is almost always just raise your prices. That'll solve a lot of your problems right there. Um,
I'm such a people person. I was like, I would look at my contacts and see who might better suit them and try to pair them up. It was funny when you were talking about that. Honestly, the first thing I thought of was like really large businesses that have multiple brands and how they start to sell off some brands because that's not the direction they want to focus in anymore. They want to focus on these areas. So sometimes it's just easier to focus your time on three or four things and be successful in those three or four things than it is to have 20 things going on and spreading yourself too thin.
yeah, and a lot of times, like if you're dealing with like a sole proprietor, or somebody who's like a specialized skill, a lot of times you have to have the discussion. Well, is it time to bring on a protege? And some of those clients who aren't exactly who you're looking for, they're not the most profitable, but they might be, they're the ones you learned on when you were starting out. Maybe it's a good time to bring on a protege and have them learn on those simpler clients, the ones that aren't, that you're not really looking for, but you kind of learn the ropes. There's a lot of ways of dealing with the day to day, and a lot of out of the box thinking is sometimes necessary. And
Interns are a great opportunity there as well because they typically do not have as high of a cost as an employee would. There's still a monetary cost to that, of course, but it's much lower, and you're giving someone a future opportunity, like your protege concept that you were discussing, and they're there to support you and get some of those daily tasks off of your hands.
yeah. So again, I think we shouldn't let the day to day prevent us from being where we want to be. But then again, we also
Absolutely.
need to realize that it's the day to day that allows us to do the next thing, and we can't just throw everything we can't throw what pays the bills under the bus in order to do the next thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've been a little bit guilty of that in the past, where it's like, oh, well, this makes money, but I don't want to do it anymore. Um, which I probably shouldn't do that. Um, cool.
Assess your needs, make choices moving forward, and it again, look, all of this is about learning as you go. If you failed in some way, if you're spending your time in the wrong way, if something feels weird, if it's not aligned, what we do as humans is often to go to the extreme of flight or fight, right? And either run away or push it back. When really we could just take a step, take a breath, and we could learn from that and try to do something different next time, or try a different approach, or choose that that's not where my time needs to be spent anymore. It's just not a productive piece of my life and what I'm trying to do moving forward.
Cool. Well, I really like that answer. And we're out of questions. We've gone a little bit longer,
You did
so
well, yeah, I was gonna say.
I always enjoy talking to you. You always got a very cool perspective on things. Why don't you give us a plug for your company again, and a plug for your services, and how folks can get a hold of you?
Absolutely. Again, my name is Vicki Fields. My company is Elevate Your Team. My focus is to discover the best solution to move you and your team forward while finding joy along the way. It should not be a stuffy process. Let's have fun and help people be successful. And that can mean a lot of things. But quite often, I find that our opportunities come in giving our people the skills to be successful. So maybe it's leadership development, maybe it's customer service, maybe it's just setting up some policies or looking at succession planning. Whatever that is, I have several tools in my HR toolkit to help you and your team do what you all do best.
Great. And how can folks get a hold of you?
Oh, absolutely. My website is www.vickyfields.com, spelled just as my name is. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. Again, Vicky Fields.
Great. Thanks a lot. And that's going to conclude for today. I want to thank our sponsor, Digital On-Ramp WSI, where we turn searchers into visitors, visitors into buyers, and buyers into lifelong clients. All January, we're having a great assessment where we will try to align your business plan with your marketing plan. So give us a call for that. You can find contact information down below in the notes. Also, we have fun gifts for everyone. Buy nothing like a novelty T-shirt to say "I love you" on Valentine's Day. Maybe a maybe "I love you, honey" mug. And we also are brought to you by Pillow Sonic. One of the best ways to say "I love you" is to not disturb your spouse by having something under your pillow to play your podcast and your relaxing music and not disturb them. So again, I want to thank our guest Vicki Fields, and we will see you all next week, where we're going to have a very big change to what we normally cover. We're going to be talking about some skincare issues. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.